I deal with some very intelligent people who specialize in monitoring global energy security. In order to do that, you have to, have your finger on the pulse of geopolitics around the world. But this Russian conflict has, again, when you create clones, don't be surprised when they behave like clones. We have across, all of journalism, academia, think tanks. There's a bias, a strong, heavy bias against Russia and anything Russia, so strong that we are incapable of thinking rationally about Russia, that we turn Russia into a bunch of, simple cartoon characters, Boris and Natasha from Bullwinkle, Spy versus Spy from Mad Magazine. And we actually believe that that's the way it is.
Good morning, comrades. Today, we bring you a gripping battlefield update. New developments are shaking the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Brace yourselves, because we have major shifts in troop movements, international involvement, and a new strategic blow emerging in Zaporizhzhia. Let's dive in. As Inspector Scott Ritter has recently observed, these events mark a turning point in the ongoing conflict. Let's see how they unfold. In the southern theater of Ukraine, things are escalating fast. Russia has amassed a formidable force of 200,000 troops along the front lines of Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro, and Crimea. The scale of this mobilization signals a carefully calculated operation, far from the isolated skirmishes we've seen earlier in this conflict. The size and scope of this buildup suggests that Moscow has been planning this offensive for months, possibly even longer. Inspector Scott Ritter's analysis aligns with this, pointing out that Russia's military machine is executing a deliberate, large-scale strategy, one that shifts the war's focus to the south with the intention of breaking Ukrainian resistance along the Dnipro River. Russia isn't just sending soldiers to the front lines. According to reports, they've prepared enough logistics to sustain these operations for at least 3 months. This means that Russia is not aiming for a quick blitz, but preparing for a sustained campaign, grinding Ukraine down with sheer numbers and firepower. It's a war of attrition, and Moscow is betting on the exhaustion of Ukrainian defenses. And make no mistake, this buildup didn't happen overnight. Colonel Douglas Macgregor noted that earlier Ukrainian offensives in Sumy and Kharkiv served as convenient distractions, drawing Ukrainian forces away from the more vulnerable southern lines. Now, with Ukrainian troops thinly spread and resources drained, Russia has the opportunity to launch its decisive blow. The Russians are wasting no time. Bombs are already falling along the front lines, with guided missiles and artillery strikes paving the way for the advancing troops. Helicopter raids have also been reported, targeting Ukrainian strongholds with precision. This massive force aims to push beyond the Zaporizhzhia border and secure key positions along the western banks of the Dnipro River. If successful, this will cut Ukraine's southern defenses in half, rendering them nearly helpless against future Russian offensives. With momentum shifting, the question is no longer if Russia will strike, but how far they'll go. The buildup in Zaporizhzhia could be the beginning of the end for Ukrainian defenses in the region. Another unexpected development has surfaced. North Korea is playing a quiet yet increasingly critical role in the conflict. According to South Korea's Yonhap News, North Korea has sent not just ammunition but entire production lines to Russia, ensuring a steady supply of artillery shells and munitions. This level of support demonstrates Pyongyang's commitment to strengthening Russia's military position. There are also unconfirmed reports that up to 3,000 North Korean soldiers have already arrived in Kursk, possibly preparing for deployment in Ukraine. The U.S. acknowledges the possibility of these troops being on the ground, but it remains unclear whether they are actively engaged in combat or simply providing logistical support. And it doesn't stop there. Some military analysts predict that North Korea could increase its deployment over time. Imagine this: what starts with 1 North Korean soldier for every 6 Russians could soon escalate to 1 in 4. If this trend continues, we might see tens of thousands of North Korean troops bolstering Russian units on the Ukrainian front, significantly altering the balance of power. This partnership between Russia and North Korea is reminiscent of how NATO uses private contractors on the battlefield, shadow actors who perform critical tasks while staying out of the spotlight. As Inspector Scott Ritter notes, such alliances, though covert, can dramatically shift the course of war. While Russia's momentum surges, Ukraine's situation on the battlefield becomes more precarious with each passing day. A critical challenge Ukraine faces is its reliance on Western mercenaries, individuals who are presented as private contractors but operate in key combat roles. These mercenaries hired by NATO-aligned governments and private military firms, bolster Ukrainian defenses, but only when the odds favor them. However, when things turn south, these contractors are typically the first to withdraw. Their primary goal is self-preservation, not loyalty to Ukrainian commanders. Colonel Douglas Macgregor highlights that this mercenary-first policy leads to sudden breakdowns in Ukrainian defenses, often at the worst possible moments. Once the mercenaries pull out, Ukrainian troops are left scrambling to cover the gaps exposed to devastating Russian offensives. As these private contractors leave the battlefield, Ukrainian commanders are forced to react with limited manpower. They have to shift troops from other areas to compensate, often weakening other defensive positions in the process. And NATO support, while seemingly generous, isn't designed for long-term defense. It's transactional and temporary. The moment Western fighters see the situation becoming untenable, they retreat, leaving Ukrainian units to face overwhelming Russian firepower alone. The consequences? Catastrophic. Ukrainian troops are often left holding the line just long enough to facilitate the mercenaries' withdrawal. In doing so, these abandoned soldiers absorb the full force of Russian artillery, airstrikes, and advancing ground units. It's not just a tactical problem, it's a deadly one, with entire units wiped out during retreats. This dynamic places Ukraine in an impossible position, unable to sustain its defenses over time. NATO's strategy appears cold and calculated. Mercenaries are treated as disposable assets, but when they flee, it's Ukrainian forces that suffer the most. These soldiers must fight to cover the escape, absorbing losses that grow heavier with each retreat. And as Russian pressure intensifies in the south, it becomes clear that these retreats are no longer isolated events. Whole front lines are beginning to collapse. Russian artillery and air support now dominate key sectors, forcing Ukrainian units to retreat under chaotic circumstances. With each new day, the cracks in Ukraine's defense widen, and Russian forces continue their relentless push. As Inspector Scott Ritter has emphasized, the momentum on the battlefield is decisively shifting toward Russia. If Ukraine cannot regroup and stabilize its defenses soon, it risks losing control over critical regions in the south, paving the way for a decisive Russian victory. Now, we stand at what could be the most critical 24 hours of this war, a pivotal moment that may shape the conflict's outcome for months to come. Reports are emerging that Zaporizhzhia, a key Ukrainian stronghold and a vital piece of its southern defensive network, has fallen into Russian hands. Although Ukraine has not officially confirmed the loss, the shifting front lines strongly suggest that Zaporizhzhia is now under Russian control. The strategic significance of Zaporizhzhia cannot be overstated. As part of Ukraine's southern defense line, it acted as a crucial buffer, preventing Russian forces from advancing toward more critical areas near the Dnieper River. Its fall represents more than just a tactical victory. It opens the door for Russia to push deeper, cutting off supply lines and isolating Ukrainian forces scattered across the region. Even Western media outlets, including The Economist, have begun to acknowledge the magnitude of this development. If Russia capitalizes on this opportunity, their forces could reach the western banks of the Dnieper River, securing a strategic corridor that would effectively cut Ukraine in two. What's unfolding here isn't just a temporary shift, it's the culmination of months of Russian planning. The capture of Zaporizhzhia signals the beginning of a larger Russian encirclement strategy. Ukrainian units, already stretched thin, now risk becoming trapped without access to reinforcements or supply lines. If Russian forces can solidify their positions, Ukraine may find itself facing not just a tactical setback, but a devastating collapse of its southern front. As Inspector Scott Ritter has pointed out, this moment marks a critical turning point in the conflict. Ukrainian commanders are scrambling to stabilize their forces and prevent further losses, but the challenges are mounting. With morale weakening and supplies dwindling, the coming days will test Ukraine's ability to hold the line under immense pressure. The question now isn't just whether Ukraine can survive this assault, it's how long they can hold out. With Russian forces moving deeper into Ukrainian territory and defenses buckling under pressure, the next 48 hours could determine the fate of the southern front and potentially the entire course of the war. So, here we are. Russia's hammer looms over Zaporizhzhia while Ukraine braces for what could be a defining moment in this conflict. With reinforcements arriving from the east and mercenaries retreating, it's becoming increasingly clear Russia is determined to make this winter count. As Inspector Scott Ritter's analysis underscores, Russia's strategic patience is paying off. The next few days will determine if Ukraine can withstand the storm or if it's destined to break under the pressure. The game is far from over. Stay tuned as we continue covering the unfolding battle because things are only heating up from here.